Hello, everyone. Today we have our group project, and it's about what English teachers should know about language acquisition. And our group members are myself, Kaori, and we also have my colleagues, Noreye, Jonathan, and Juan Carlos.
Language acquisition is the process by which human develops the ability to understand and use language for communication, whether it's their first language or a subsequent one. It involves learning various linguistic components like phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics. We also have key aspects of language acquisition such as natural process, stages, innatedness versus environmental influence, second language acquisition, and importance. And each one of these ones says something really important. For example, the natural process, this is really special for children and often happens without formal instruction. And of course, we have a process that is typically progresses through distinct stages, starting with basic noises and sounds, then moving the babbling and eventually to single words, phrases, and sentences. We also have different theories about language acquisition, with some emphasizing innate language ability and others focusing on the role of environmental input and interaction. Acquiring a second language also follows specific stages and processes, with some learners progressing more quickly than others. And in here, and language acquisition is crucial for effective communication, social interaction, and overall development. And then we have some examples of language acquisition milestones. And here is where we have babbling. Here we say that infants begin to produce a variety of sounds and syllables. Holophrastic stage, and here children use single words to express complete ideas. To work stage, and here the children combine words to form simple sentences. In telegraphic speech, children produce short, grammatical, incomplete sentences.
So, when we talk about language acquisition, we inevitably have to talk about Krashen. So, Stephen Krashen is a very prominent figure in SLA, which is second language acquisition. He's an American linguist. He's also an educational researcher. So, his work is very important in our field. And he has a few theories or hypotheses, one of the most important ones in language acquisition being the input hypothesis. So basically, this hypothesis talks about how language is acquired. And this happens when learners are exposed to what he calls comprehensible input. Comprehensible input is all the language that is presented to students that they can understand, but surely they're not gonna understand 100% of it. This is what he calls I plus one. This means that you present language structures or maybe vocabulary that they are familiar with, as well as some new vocabulary or some new structures that they don't really consciously know about. But what's important is that they understand the message that is being relied, and they also understand the context in which they can use that language. So my colleague Noreye is going to further explain uh, another type of input in the other slides. But for the meantime, I want to show you maybe two small little tips when we talk about input that we can apply in our lessons as teachers. So one important thing is adapted speech. This is just simplifying the structures that we are using as well as the vocabulary so that it fits and it matches the student's current level. And but we have to remember we have to give them also that plus one, which is that little extra. It's kind of like a little gift that we're giving our students like a little bonus so that they get something new and they're not, getting stuck with that same vocabulary or that same grammar. Also, we talked in a few other lessons, prior lessons with Miss Janine, we talked about resources. Why are resources important? Um, when we're teaching a language, we shouldn't really rely so heavily on translation because it does take an extra cognitive step when we translate. So it's better to directly relate the object that we're talking about or the topic that we're talking about with maybe a visual or a graphic support. This is very useful for students so that um, they can directly go into the goal language. In this case, in our case, for example, with English. So instead of relying on translation, maybe we can use our flashcards. Maybe we can also use videos and maybe also TPR.
Hello, this is Noreya Garcia. A topic that really caught my attention was the hypothesis from Krashen about the optimal input. What is this about? He says that we acquire language and we develop literacy from input, from understanding what we hear and what we read, not from speaking or writing or writing. He also says that the ability that we have to speak and write fluently and accurately is the result of acquiring language from input. Now, he explains that there are four characteristics from optimal input, which the first one is comprehensible. Um, it doesn't mean that we need to understand or know all the words or the meaning of every word or every single part of a text, but when we acquire a language, we learn from context and we are acquiring vocabulary and we are not noticing that we are acquiring. But the, the language has to be understandable and the way a reading and a listening can be acquired. The second one is compelling. This is very interesting because compelling it's about how much interested it's a student or a person a reading the learner or the person who is acquiring the language. The context that we listen, that we read, has to be engaging. So in that way, students are learning and they don't notice that they are learning. So it's not boring for them. After that, the third component or the third characteristic is rich. Mm, it means that a story or a text or an audio or a listening have to include a lot of support in that way the students can comprehend the materials or comprehend the context of the story. So this can support the development and the acquiring process of the language. So the last one is abundant, which is very important for the students and in the process of acquiring a new language. Why? Because we have to provide numerous opportunities for the acquisition. For example, let the students be in a context when they can apply what they're learning with the real environment or with the real life. And then I have found here uh, what activities can we use for comprehensible or compelling or which are rich and abundant. For example, stories, story listening, and reading, especially readings that are about fiction. According to Mason, he says that understanding stories, that they have pictures or drawings, make the students acquire vocabulary and also grammar in a interesting way. Also, reading especially fictions, he says that reading can be um, comprehensible for low intermediate levels readers when teachers help in book selection. So, if we want our students to improve in vocabulary, we can help them by telling them uh, like the parameters or why they should read about their interests too.
Right. So the topic that I have to um, explain about the output in general is this three principles. So the first one says output and language acquisition. So output refers to learners producing the language. So when we tell our students to produce, when we model sentences, we model conversations that they have to produce, right? So in this one, it also shows us the research shows that forcing output too early can cause anxiety and hinder natural acquisition. Yes, but if there's not an instruction previously, for example, let's say that the student didn't understand the model the teacher was given, the student didn't pay attention. It might happen when the teacher was showing a model or an example. You need to have a model, a guide to start producing. Otherwise, there's not going to be production. The key to acquisition is comprehensible input. Output should come when learners are ready to use the language meaningfully. Using the language meaningfully, it's production, but you can start it from the beginning by the very first class. But there's have to be a model. There has to be a way of showing how this production can be done. Now here it shows limitations of traditional output activities. We got traditional tasks like the verb conjugation drills. I, write, story are mechanical. They are mechanical indeed, but sometimes or most of the time there must be taught. This is something I would like to emphasize. There's not going to be any production if, unfortunately, the system, according to the we are having right now, does not allow us to be more resourceful. You know what I mean? So definitely there has to be a mechanical instruction in order for students to be productive. This happen a lot, especially if you have 30, 40 students in a classroom. If you do have less, like private institutions like 5, 6, I mean, the problem is going to be different. In this case, you can adapt another type of output activities rather than doing it mechanically. This task focus on form over meaning and do not support real communication. Yeah, that's right. I totally agree about it. Like I said, you need to show them a model, but first they need to know what they're talking or what they're saying, because otherwise, just by relating, could happen with kids. Kids might be good at it, but adults and teenagers they need a model definitely. Now, we got some principles here of communicative output. We have effective output activities, like, for example, engage students in authentic communication, require processing of meaning, not just grammar. That's right, not only grammar. But, like I said before, it must be taught. Otherwise, how you are going to be learning or how you're going to be producing if you don't have the formula or the previous formula before. Uh, this is what I encounter very interesting and controversial. I might say it here because it's a task, but the whole master is aimed for public and private institutions, right? Mostly public. Public teachers are like they lack of resources, and the only thing they do is teaching grammar. But what other tools can they use if they are not provided with all the tools they should be to teach a language? And adding to that, the fact that students do not want to. So here is the controversial thing. Everything on the paper looks beautiful, but in the field, it's way different. So that's basically it. Thank you very much.